Alright, sit down and shut up, because this is going to be a heavy one. Thus, we're bringing out the big guns today. Hey everybody, Alex here, and welcome to another video. Just as a preamble, this one may be not dark, but it may not be the most positive of things. It really depends on where I see this conversation going for myself. So, based on the title, if it doesn't interest you, just don't watch it or listen to it. If you're new around here, these tend to be more of a podcasty format. So no fancy editing, no bells and whistles on the screen. You can go about doing your day, typing up a spreadsheet, doing your taxes, doing somebody else's taxes, what have you. But what I really wanted to do with this is kind of play devil's advocate, because at the end of the day, I'm not your parent, I'm not your boss. You do you live your life the way you want to. I am not being political at all. I'm just trying to, I guess you could say, call attention to a few things here. So, usually with these videos, I really don't like to put a time frame on them, but it's a little bit recent and it's in the past, so I think I can talk about it. And that's going to be the year 2023 for the video game industry. Banger year. Amazing games came out this year, or back in 2023. And I find it kind of cool that year over year, the quality of games is just getting better and better. Even that wacky year of 2020, a bunch of bangers came out. However, there's also been a lot of games that have just gone under the radar. You know, there's so many that if you're not a hit, you gotta quit. I do not know why I did it that way. Anyway, but the point I'm trying to make here is video games in general, yes, it's a beautiful medium. To me, I almost think that it's rivaling cinema for what I guess you could say used to be for our parents. At least for my parents, movies were always their thing. My mom loved documentaries and all that sort of thing. But in terms of production, in terms of performance and all that, you know, I would even say for better or for worse, the Game Awards, it's almost like, I do not want to compare it to the Academy Awards because it's still an ad show at the end of the day. But when it comes to the voice actors and stuff, you know, voice actors are legitimate actors. A lot of people do not think they are. They think it's just some guy who goes in a booth and reads a bunch of stuff off a piece of paper. They're not. They actually study the characters. They study the psychology. They work with their voice director to get an idea of context. You know, they read the whole script. They do all that acting stuff. You just don't see them, you know? And they have a talent to alter their voice. And I've heard in some interviews with voice actors, like they were actors first, got a voice acting gig and discovered, hey, I'd rather work in a booth. And that's literally what they did. And they dropped all the theater stuff. They dropped all the walk-on stuff. They dropped all the extra stuff. And it's really interesting in that effect where you see this kind of combination of industries and, you know, I would say crafts and artistic expression. But with that comes a caveat, because now video games are rivaling films in terms of budget. As a matter of fact, I think they go higher, you know? And I'm not an expert on this. I'm not a financial advisor. But for the amount of layoff and studio closures, and I guess you could say financial performance, I really do think the video game industry as a whole, as much as beautiful games and wonderful creations, and we honor those who kicked ass in any given year, and we acknowledge, you know, the best games of that year, and we try to highlight the independent gems and all that stuff. The industry has a problem. And you could blame it on the wackiness of 2020 with overexpansion and all that stuff. And, you know, I can speak to that a little bit personally. As some of you may or may not know, I actually changed industries after working in hospitality for 15 years during that time frame. And a lot of people did. from that industry. I was already thinking about getting out of it in the first place. That just happened to spur it on. But I went on to work for a startup. And if you've ever worked in a startup, you have to have a certain mindset, in my personal opinion. Because with a startup, it's very much, I guess you could say, hot in the pan, right? You make it, you kick ass for a time, and the purpose of a startup is to get sold. In my case, it didn't, but it reaches a point where huge profitability and then just as a steep decline, depending on the industry, depending on what it goes with, depending on seed money and funding and all that fun stuff. But it goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. It kind of stays, and then maybe it stabilizes a bit, and then they try to go public, and then they do go public, and then all of a sudden it just goes under because that startup mentality is now being run by a group of investors who may or may not know that particular industry. They just saw numbers on a screen, numbers on a stock ticker, and thought, hey, maybe this is something I can make money off of. And we see that a lot when it comes to some of these video game companies making very strange decisions when it comes to how to operate their finances. I'm not going to touch on the whole AI thing, but every time Square Enix talks about it, everybody kind of scratches their head. Like, I don't remember anybody liking this. It's not them. It's the investors. And that's where these problems come into play with the industry. Games cost too much money. Games just cost too much money. And if you're a publicly traded company, which not all of them are, if you don't make the money, the investors want to know why. And it comes down to the C-level dudes, CEO, CFO, whatever, who have a legal financial responsibility to make money for their investors. Otherwise, they go to jail. What is the easiest way to make up shortfall when it comes to finances? Payroll. It's always been payroll. Back in hospitality, when shit hits the fan, what's the first thing that they tackle? Payroll. It used to be a thing when I, at least in New York, Q1, January through February usually, in New York is a very strange time frame because, well, at least back in the day, Christmas in New York, high demand season, $500 room rates. Okay, somebody sit down, don't relax. $500 is cheap, trust me. And that's for a shit hotel. You want to go to Midtown, you want to go to Macy's, you want to go to Rockefeller, you want to be around there, you're paying $600-700, and that's a deal. Lucky if you get a $350 on a group rate where you're going to be walking around or driving around in a bus all day. But when you hit Q1, all the Christmas people, or holiday people rather, all the Thanksgiving people, all the tourists vanish. All the financial administrations and holiday parties vanish. Rates drop, or at least they used to. 119 from a high of 700 pushing 1,000 depending. New Year's Eve at the Marriott Marquis, you want a suite, you're paying $1,200. Bare minimum, and that was as of 10 years ago. But Q1, January, after all the dust is settled, rates are like 100, 119, sometimes 209, and everybody freaks out. A hotel in New York has to operate at near 100% occupancy every single day. Otherwise, you're in trouble. You can't afford the mortgage. You can't afford the utilities. You can't afford the payroll. You can't afford the equipment. So what's the first thing you're going to tackle to cover that shortfall? You're going to go after payroll. And that leads to layoffs. Seasonal layoffs, admittedly. But it also comes down to it, at least for some departments like housekeeping, they know to expect it, you know? They would be like, oh, it's going to be January. They'll ask their boss, what's the occupancy look like? I want to plan a vacation. They'll get unemployment and everything. That's perfectly well and good. But this is the difference. It's a seasonal layoff. They know in March, April, they're going to come back. They know if a last minute group comes in, they're going to come back, work 2 or 3 weeks, and go back on unemployment. When a video game studio closes, somebody's going to say, okay, I have to find a new job. Luckily, this industry is huge. And if it's anything like my friends in the arts industry, everybody knows everybody. Everybody gets a job through a connection or somebody they went to school with or something like that. I can get a job at XYZ studio, no problem. I know a guy who knows a guy, etc., etc. Cool, no problem. But then the rest of them lay people off. I can't even fathom how many thousands of jobs in this industry were lost. There is a website that literally posts layoff status of different companies, at least in video games. I think it just came out this year. And, people add their names so that, and obviously the LinkedIn profiles, because everybody wants to help everybody. This is an industry, as somebody who does not work in it, you have to have a passion for it, much like hospitality, much like food and beverage. If you do not like it, and I'm speaking from the hospitality side, don't do it, which is why I got out of it. I no longer enjoyed it. But when it's taken away from you, and then you look to elsewhere where you can utilize your talent and your passion, and you see everybody's in the same situation, it's demoralizing. But the crazy thing is, video games still have to be made. And it's been in the news with Embracer Group, who literally bought a bunch of stuff, and they made one of the biggest business mistakes you can make, which is playing with money you do not fucking have in your hand. And I'm a little heated because I've seen this happen so many times in my own professional life. Not directly with me, but with other companies I've worked with and stuff, and or alongside. And I'm like, why would you do that? Why would you, especially when you're talking about billions, why would you do that? Why the fuck would you do that? You know why? Investors. They want to see this. But they're not industry experts. It's a little bit of a weird thing. And I'm generalizing here, of course. And I promise I'm going to get into the video game talk in a minute. But I'm trying to set the stage here where I'm not saying it's a broken industry, but there's so many different factors that tie into it. It's not even like, okay, this game didn't sell that well. Okay, the Metacritic on this game isn't doing so well at all. There's other external factors that are actually playing into all of this, and it's a problem. It is a huge problem for this hobby. It's a huge problem for this art form. There's a reason why you see some of these guys make their own studios, and they literally only make one game. There's a reason why you see why a lot of these studios do crowdfunding, because they, honestly, they can't get investors to back it, and even if they do, or they get some, they may want their creative freedom to do what they want to do. And even then, there's another factor that plays into all this, and it's the fans of the games, to be completely honest with you. And I'm going to bring this back, and I'm going to utilize two games that I recently played. The first being Mass Effect Andromeda, as I alluded to in a video from some time ago. I thought it was a fine game. I thought it was good. I didn't think it was great. I thought, I'm not going to use the word mid, but it was very average. And when that game came out, everybody was expecting the second coming of Mass Effect. BioWare's name, for the longest time, and this is going to sound terrible because I love their games, it's a marketing thing. It has nothing to do with the quality of the game. I'm sorry. You could slap Warner Brothers on something, for example, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be Academy Award worthy. You could slap BioWare on something, and that doesn't mean you're going to get the video game equivalent of Shakespeare. BioWare has not been BioWare for several years. Maybe even less by the time I put this up. I don't even know. But when Mass Effect Andromeda came out, they were pretty open in saying, the original Mass Effect was supposed to be a trilogy, and that's it. There was not supposed to be anything else. The challenge that they had, and it's very, very obvious if you keep up with any of these video game companies, was EA. They had to put in multiplayer. They had to put in microtransactions. They had to put in this. They had to give open world. They had to do this, that, the other thing. Half the writers quit, or they resigned, or they retired. I can't remember exactly. They probably took a bunch of money. But guess what? Their heart wasn't in it anymore, and they got out of it. And now we have games like Anthem, which, again, I don't know what they were thinking with that, but I can tell you it begins with the letter E. But with Andromeda, people were expecting the second coming of Shepard, Commander, and everything else. And the timeline for it's actually kind of shoved in to the original Mass Effect trilogy. It actually takes place, I think, between 2 and 3, or during the events of 3. And this other protagonist named Ryder, and you get to pick male or female. They're twins, and pretty much, depending on which one you pick, is the one that's canon. And then you go about your adventure and everything else. And essentially, the Milky Way is no longer inhabitable. Little they realize the events of Mass Effect towards the end. And you're in the Andromeda Galaxy, and basically you're exploring around to try to find the next bit of humanity. But they've actually been in cryostasis for 650 years. So whatever happened in the original Mass Effect doesn't matter because, you know, everybody dead. And I imagine, I mean, obviously that's, you know, space science, but I imagine they also did that so that they could separate it as much as they possibly could from that original trilogy. And this was supposed to be a new story in a new timeline. Well, not timeline, a new time and place, etc., etc. But here's the problem. You put Mass Effect in the title, and fans weren't having it. And the game was rushed because EA has a financial requirement to their investors. It got rushed out. Graphically, it was a mess. I didn't have any weird animations considering I played it like 10 years after the fact, but I did have one instance where Ryder's shoulders like literally went into his ears, you know, and it was funny because he kind of just went like, oop, and then that was that. But you can feel it. You can feel like this was rushed. You can feel like some of these things were phoned in. And usually with a Mass Effect game or the original trilogy, I literally take all the time in the world I need and want to learn about, you know, the characters on the Citadel and all that sort of thing, and get to know the crew and have, you know, a romantic love interest and all that stuff. Andromeda, I'm sorry, it was completely phoned in. I'm not belittling the folks who wrote any of this stuff, but I could tell they were like, okay, this archetype works, and this archetype works, and this works, so we'll do that. And I was kind of upset. Like, not in a negative way, just kind of like, yeah, it's a new trilogy, but I don't think it's starting off on the right foot. And honestly, this game got hammered. It reviewed decently, but it got hammered by the fan base, right? And in our day and age, online presence, influencers, all that stuff, I would dare say are almost as important as, video game critics at this point. Because if somebody says one thing, and it gets a bunch of views, and it gets a bunch of clicks, the next person's going to do the same thing. I can't tell you, I typed in, after I finished this game, Mass Effect Andromeda retrospective, because truthfully, I'm projecting here, because I really didn't do any research. I just wanted to talk about it. And every retrospective is just about how broken the game was. I couldn't find anything positive except for like 2 or 3 videos, and the moral of those videos was, this game's biggest problem was having Mass Effect in the title. And I could not agree more. If they had titled it Andromeda, a new story within the Mass Effect universe, set 650 years after the events with Commander Shepard, or just called it Andromeda, a Mass Effect Exodus. From the creators of Mass Effect come a new sci-fi space opera, etc., etc. People had an expectation going in, not realizing the original writers are long gone because BioWare's next big hit. BioWare. And over time, I realized that the name BioWare was purely used for marketing. It was to tap into somebody's brain, like me, to get them to buy the game. And then it comes out. And I'll be honest, I played through it. As I said, I enjoyed it, but it felt very hollow. I did not bother to do the side quests. They really felt tacked on. And I would dare say, like, let's say, huge event going on, and all of a sudden something pops up in your communication device, like, hey, by the way, if you're by the newspaper stand, like, what the fuck is wrong with you, newspaper stand? There's shit blowing up outside. You want me to go find 12 pages missing from a magazine? Financial requirements. And BioWare's had a lot of problems, even before that. And going back to the influencer and, fan base and everything else, it really doesn't need to be dwelled on. But the ending to Mass Effect 3, I was like, all right. I don't think there was any good way to end it. I'm more disappointed that they changed the ending due to backlash. I think from an artistic perspective, you're lying to yourself. I'm putting words in people's mouths here, but who do you think told them to do it? That's the problem. You don't see filmmakers going back and changing the fucking ending, unless it's Evangelion, but that was due to funding. I think they had like $10 for the last 3 episodes. There's one scene in Evangelion where they literally have Shinji stand at a train station for 10 minutes doing nothing just to fill time because they didn't have enough money to animate more scenes. And as such, we have 3 different endings to Evangelion because it could never be expressed the way that he wanted to do it. In the essence of Mass Effect, where you have such a choice-driven game, and whatever you choose is supposed to end this trilogy, there's really no universal way to end it where everybody would enjoy it. Or anybody would enjoy it. Again, I finished it and went, all right, well, wrote themselves into a corner with that one, but okay. I was like, whatever. I moved on. I enjoyed my time watching Shepard through all 3 games. I enjoy getting to know his crew. I enjoyed Miranda, but I enjoyed it. Why are you going to take 10 minutes and have it destroy 90 hours worth of game? You could end it and go, okay, like, listen, in the grand scheme of things, the ending to Mass Effect 3 is a terrible way to end this trilogy. Cool, how would you end it? If you ask me that, I'm going to tell you, I don't know. I don't know how to end it. I guess it's fine. How are you supposed to? Nobody told me. I'm sure nobody told them. The original writers had their vision, and somebody chimes in their ear, and they have to do it, and they have to edit it, and then nobody likes it, and then they have to go back and change it, and then they have to violate their own artistic integrity or their original vision, which probably got done in editing anyway. And you've seen this with a few video game companies this year where they make a financial decision that literally impacts thousands of their people, that literally impacts folks within the industry to a point where they need to think of something else. And no doubt that comes from investor conversation. And influencers. Because let's be honest, with social media, it's a blessing and it's a curse. Because you can be as positive as you want to be, and you can be as negative as you want to be. And I hate to break it to you guys, but negativity sells. And as somebody who tries to be positive, I hope this is the most negative video that I do. Because there is a silver lining to all this. What that silver lining is, I don't know. No, but in all seriousness, I mean, look, fact of the matter is, I did play Andromeda. And by the time I finished it, I was satisfied. Do I think it's the best BioWare game? Absolutely not. That will always be Mass Effect 2 for me. Mass Effect 2 was basically the Fast and the Furious for the last 2 hours, and it's so good for it. Let's even consider Star Wars for a minute, right? As of the filming of this video, Disney is throwing everything it can at a wall to try to figure out how to make more money out of this, and the old people are over it. You know, some people liked Andor. I liked Ashoka. I never finished it. I lost interest by the last episode. I was like, nothing fucking happened. I mean, a bunch of stuff happened, but I was like, literally, nothing fucking happened. It's all about money. It's about financing. It's about making a profit when the people who work on it are the ones who are passionate about it. And that brings me to the next game I finished very recently, which was Hogwarts Legacy by Portkey Games. And coming out of this, I have to say right off the bat, I did not expect this game to be so good. I did not expect to play an open world game where I literally spent more time doing the open world stuff than the main story, or reaching that point as I typically do in open world games, where I go, fuck this shit, I've had enough, I'm not catching birds, I'm not taking pictures, I'm going straight to the end. The side quests in this game are dark, are funny, are happy, they have a moral to it. You see a little bit of a child growing up, etc., etc. Very much in key, in line with a high school student growing up, and touching on some tragedies that, in a fantasy setting, of course, that kids in the wizarding world may experience or see, or touching on different social issues and, you know, and social grievances and injustices and whatnot. I'm trying to be vague here in case you do want to play it. But I was very impressed. I was like, wow, I did not expect this at all. I just expected to play Quidditch as a side game, and that was it. I never read the books. I read the first book, and I watched all the movies. And I do not consider myself like a huge Harry Potter fan. Like, I'll watch them. I enjoyed them. You long-time listeners know I love a high school growing up story and coming of age stuff. That's like my jam. But other than the movies, that's really it. As a matter of fact, if you ask me which one's my favorite, I don't even know which is which in order. I have to give you a scene, and then you tell me which one it is. I'll go, yeah, I like that one. I think it's Goblet of Fire. As somebody helped me out with the other day. But I played this game, honestly, after a time where it came out. And I was absolutely thrilled with it. I did not expect it to be this good. I did not expect it to be as well thought out. I don't even know who the fuck Portkey Games is. I thought it was the Just Cause guys working on it. Maybe they helped. I think it's Avalanche. But they did a bang-up job. Phenomenal game. And here's the thing. It's an existing IP. They didn't have to call it Harry Potter Hogwarts Legacy. They literally just called it, or the Wizarding World Hogwarts Legacy. They just called it Portkey Games Hogwarts Legacy. Everybody knows what Hogwarts is, right? Legacy. They in no way, and I think this is where the marketing comes in, if they tacked on Harry Potter Hogwarts Legacy, there's going to be an expectation. I would think. I would expect to see cameos. I would expect to see Rupert Grimm? I don't even know their names. See? Told you. I would expect to have cameos from everybody. I would expect to hear their voices. I would expect to see their likenesses. I would expect to be flying over Hogwarts on a broom, which you can do, and then go to Hagrid's shack. I would expect all that. They completely removed it. They just said, we are literally using this IP. That is it. If Mass Effect Andromeda was just called Andromeda, there's no... I guess you could say, marketing familiarity to it. But if they marketed it as from the creators of Mass Effect and use that same fucking from the BioWare studio, it may not have been as slammed as it was because it wasn't Mass Effect 4. You know? Graphics and writing and all that stuff aside, sure, but it would have been one less thing for them to deal with. And this game, for Hogwarts Legacy, expectations were very high. People were hyped for it. I was kind of tepid. I was like, this could go left. This could go really left. And this is where we go back to the social media. The creator of Harry Potter said a few things that really did not go over well. And I'm not going to get into the politics or whatever. Again, I'm not your parent. But it was very violating to a lot of the fan base, to the point where they were calling for boycotts and not buying the game and no longer purchasing Harry Potter goods, services, butterbeer, candies, going to the Wizarding World and whatever studio it is and all this stuff. And boycotts are a very effective way to make a message known. Personally, I don't think she cares. But here's where I get a little upset about it. I do not remember where I saw it, but there was a tweet from somebody from the studio who said, this is your choice. If you do not want to buy our game, totally get it. But we put our heart and souls into it. And it definitely reflects in that game. There is so much passion into this game. Everything about this game shows a respect, a reverence, and a love for the source material. I have no doubt some of the creators of this game got a sucker punch when they saw whatever the hell it is she said. I know what she said. I'm just not mentioning it, obviously. But it broke my heart. This is their first game, as far as I understand. And coming off 23, banger year for games. What do you think would happen if the game did not sell? Warner Bros. Would just shut it down. They would cut their losses and run. And then we would have more jobs displaced. And people may not have played this game. I waited for a price drop because, again, not passionate about it. But it is something I wanted to check out. And I'm very happy I did. And this game did not deserve to be, in my opinion, as good. As a matter of fact, after finishing it, I've said, why couldn't they get these guys to make a new Jedi Academy game? Because they could knock it out of the park. They would have to get, Mark and the gang and everything because, if we go with the old lore, he would be running it. If we go with the Disney lore, I have no idea who they get, but that person would say something stupid or do something terrible, and then they'd have to rewrite it anyway. But it's a very fragile industry, is the point I'm trying to make here. It's a Titan, but it's a Titan made of glass. It's a glass cannon. And as fans of these games, as fans of video games, certain IPs, all that stuff, I'm not going to say you have a financial responsibility to have them keep their jobs, but you have a financial responsibility to help them keep their jobs. And I'm just as guilty. I'll buy games used if I'm not super into them, whatever. But I truthfully prefer to buy games new on a price drop. At least somebody gets some money. But, with a certain game, I may look and go, it's not a $70 day one game to me. More like $39.99 or maybe $49.99. And, and I try to be positive about this stuff. Even if I don't like a game, I can understand, okay, this isn't my jam, but I see where other people like it. But to me, it's very interesting because I literally played 2 open world games and had 2 very different experiences using 2 very beloved franchises. And the experience overall was very different. I don't even know how much involvement the investment team or producers, what have you, from Warner Brothers had in the making of this Harry Potter game, because, and you Harry Potter fans can chime in more on this, of course. I thought it paid pretty much a decent amount of respect to the source material. I don't know what was added, I don't know what's different, but it was believable. With Mass Effect, I could just see it. Like, they were like, okay, this worked here, this worked here. Okay, I guess we'll make this like the Citadel, and then we'll have a character who interacts like this, and we'll have a quest like this, and we'll make a reference to the XYZ number one on the Citadel meme. We'll do all that, and then it felt so fucking artificial. And EA truthfully has a rep for that, but you don't even see them making as much anymore. At least I don't. They have their thing, and they just keep doing it over and over and over again. And I think it's because, again, it's what makes them money, and they know it can hit that investment part. And if the investors vote and say, hey, we want a new Need for Speed, then they have to make a new Need for Speed. Activision, we don't have to talk about that. That's a whole other thing. But it's so crazy, though. It's like, I do feel like, as much as the financial part has a problem, the social media aspect to all this is just as bad. Because if I'm going to say content creators jump on a bandwagon of positivity or negativity, it skews everything. I would not want to work in this industry. I already suffer from anxiety. Mental health is incredibly important, and I do not know how folks work in this industry under such pressure. There's been a whole thing about crunch in this industry and how it's terrible. But then you look at all these external factors, and it's kind of perpetuating, if you ask me. Again, as somebody who doesn't work in the industry and is being an armchair expert. But there's a lot of pressure here. It's financial, and I have friends rather, who work in the arts, and I know there's give and take from what they've told me. It's like, I want to give all this stuff, and then the studio takes it away because this, that, the other thing, demographic studying, test groups, all that stuff. And ultimately it's all about making money. And I feel, from what I understand, the Harry Potter game sold well enough where they're like, yeah, cool, this is viable. But it may not have. And you may argue the franchise is too big to fail. I hate to break it to you, man. Like, nobody is too big to fail. I mean, if a big titan of business were to go under, it sends a global ripple. If Square Enix were to declare bankruptcy, what do you think would happen? For instance, a bigger studio, an EA, a Microsoft, a Sony, I'll use Capcom, I'll throw them in there too. They'll use it as a marketing ploy to say, we're trying to save this company. Which I'll admit is probably true, because they are a titan of industry. But by doing so, they also acquire all their IPs. It's an investment. It's a calculated thing. Don't think it's a goodwill thing. There is goodwill in there, but there's also a financial piece as well. But through all this rambling, I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that this is a wonderful industry. It's a brilliant hobby. I have utmost respect for the people who work in it. I think it takes a particular sort of person to work in this from a creative standpoint. It takes a very educated person to work in this from a technical standpoint. And it takes somebody with a lot of vision to work in this industry from a creative standpoint. The unfortunate thing is, a lot of these creatives, from what I've seen, are not as strong in the financial part. And unfortunately, those in the financial part don't understand the creative part. They don't understand the passion part. They see a spreadsheet, another one sees colors, right? You need a happy marriage of the two for sustainability and to keep it going. So when a financial part comes into it, that's where stuff tends to go left from a creative standpoint. And you see this. And, again, going back to Mass Effect Andromeda, creatively, it was supposed to end in 3 games. Of course, there was books and movies and all that stuff, but that was all written in as side content and everything else. And they had to jam Andromeda in there as a side story going on at the same time that drifts into another 600 years into the future. But it already has that Mass Effect name on it, and there's an expectation. People, and this is a whole nostalgia thing, they've wanted Shepard 2.0. You can't do Shepard 2.0. It doesn't make sense in the context of the writing. So they're like, all right, we'll do something completely different. But you've already set an expectation because somebody wants the marketability of the Mass Effect name. They want the marketability of the BioWare name. And you have Hogwarts Legacy, right? Complete opposite. Didn't put Wizarding World, didn't put Harry Potter. Literally just put Hogwarts in the distance and then put Hogwarts Legacy at the top and the name of the game studio, Portkey Games, which I presumably think will be making Harry Potter stuff moving forward. There's enough familiarity in that name where it's not going to be typecast as something going on within that particular Harry Potter universe. It's going to be within the Wizarding universe, but it doesn't say Wizarding. But what they promised is your own story as a Hogwarts 5th year student. By doing that, you get the marketability due to the familiarity, which is where I said if they had called it Andromeda, a new sci-fi epic from the creators of Mass Effect, follow whatever writer as they journey 650 years into the future in a new universe, the Andromeda universe. Bit, 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 marketing, blah, 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 blah. And it would have been a different story. I think. Okay, full disclosure here. I am having a difficult time trying to phrase this without sounding like a condescending asshole, because I already feel like a condescending asshole doing this topic. Social media is a very, very powerful tool. I do not think the old guard understands it. I also don't think that some folks in key positions, creatively or financially, understand it. Their words can make or break something. And in the case of Hogwarts Legacy, it could have been broken before it was even out the gate. And that's really sad. Because it's a brilliant, beautiful game. And I think that studio should be commended. I don't think they got any awards or anything, but they deserve them. Because there is so much passion in that game. The acting, the writing, the creativity, the reverence to the source material, it's all there. And I do not know how much financial involvement was in there, but I guarantee you they probably rode that coattail like, listen, we know what we're doing. And somebody said the right thing to the right people and they were allowed to do the game they wanted to do, as far as I understand. And I think that's the important thing, is artistic integrity and making the game that may not make, well, in this case it made a ton of money, but maybe it doesn't make a ton of money. But maybe the sentiment is positive and good. And as gamers, that's what we want. We want to see 2024 exceed the number of banger games we had in 2023. But the challenge is the financial piece, because they have to be like this the whole time. And it can't be. It just can't be, because it's two different sets of people, two different sets of mindset. People who may not even know, like, oh, I don't know anything about Harry Potter. I just know, the money, the money. I don't like any of that stuff. Take it out. How much is that going to cost? Well, it'd be very good if we could code this, that, and the other thing in there. It's like, no, 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 it's going to take too much time. Take it out. You see what I mean? It's a weird catch-22. But I think, again, as gamers, I would say be mindful of it. Anyway, I've been Alex. I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.